There are places in this world that do not want to be found. Not hidden places, not remote places, not places buried deep in forests, or lost at the bottom of valleys where no roads reach. No, the worst kind of places are the ones sitting right in front of you. The ones you drive past every day. The ones that exist on maps and in city records and in the memory of every person who has ever lived nearby. And yet, somehow, without anyone deciding it, everyone agrees not to look at them directly. Sector 9 was one of those places. It sat at the far southern edge of the coastal industrial zone, a sprawling stretch of rusted shipping containers, broken chain-link fencing, cracked concrete access roads, and the kind of heavy silence that settles over places where too many night shifts have happened and too few questions have been asked. The kind of place where trucks arrived at odd hours carrying loads that were never fully documented. The kind of place where workers did their jobs, kept their heads down, and did not linger after their shifts ended. It smelled wrong at night. Not the clean salt smell of the ocean that you might expect from a coastal property, but something older underneath it. Something that the salt and the wind could not quite cover. The kind of smell that registered in the back of your brain before your conscious mind could name it. The kind of smell that made your body want to leave before your mind understood why. Nobody who worked at Sector 9 talked about it. And nobody, absolutely nobody, talked about the Lighthouse. It had stood at the southern tip of the property since 1923. Built to guide commercial vessels through the rocky coastal shelf that had claimed 3 ships in the decade before its construction. For 64 years it had done its job, the light turning, the beam sweeping out across the dark water, the keeper living in the small attached cottage that no longer existed, demolished sometime in the 1970s for reasons that were not recorded in any file that anyone could find. In 1987, the Harbor Authority decommissioned it. The new automated beacon system made it redundant. The last keeper, a quiet man named Edmund Hale, who had held the position for 11 years, was given his retirement paperwork and escorted off the property, except that is not entirely accurate. Edmund Hale did not retire in 1987. Edmund Hale died in the lamp room of the Lighthouse in 1986. He was found by a Harbor Authority inspector who had come to do a routine maintenance check. The inspector climbed the spiral staircase and found Edmund sitting in the wooden chair beside the Fresnel lens mechanism, hands folded in his lap, eyes open, facing the glass panels and the ocean beyond. No sign of struggle, no medical event that the subsequent autopsy could identify, no cause of death, just gone. The inspector's report noted one detail that never made it into the official summary. He noted that Edmund's body was not in the chair when he first entered the lamp room. He noted that when he first entered, the lamp room appeared empty. He had turned to go back down the stairs, and Edmund had been sitting in the chair when he turned back around. The inspector attributed this to shock and poor lighting. The harbor authority agreed and closed the report. They decommissioned the lighthouse the following year. They padlocked the door. They told themselves that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. Jake Mercer was 26 years old, and he did not believe in ghost stories. This was not bravado. It was not the performed toughness of a young man trying to seem unafraid. It was simply his honest assessment of the world, a world that he had found, in his experience, to be entirely explainable. 2 years in the Army Reserves had taught him that fear was a physical response to physical threats. 3 years as a night shift supervisor at a logistics warehouse in an area of the city that most people would not drive through after dark had taught him that darkness itself was not dangerous. What existed in darkness was the same as what existed in light, people, objects, and weather. Nothing more. He was not stupid. He understood that some people had experiences they could not explain. He simply believed that the explanation existed, whether or not the person had found it yet. He took the security job at Sector 9 because it paid well, and the hours suited him. He had been between positions for 2 months, and the overnight differential put the number high enough that he signed the contract the same day he received it. His first meeting with his supervisor, Darnell Hayes, was brief. Darnell was a large man in his mid-50s, heavy through the chest and shoulders, moving with the careful economy of someone who had done physical work for a very long time. He had a broad, flat face and small, careful eyes that assessed things before he spoke about them. He was not unfriendly, but he was precise. He said exactly what he meant, and nothing extra. He walked Jake through the property on the first night, row by row, through the container stacks, A through F. The east gate with its keypad lock and its rusted hinges that needed to be lifted slightly to close properly. The west access road where the asphalt had buckled from years of heavy truck traffic, and you had to slow down to avoid bottoming out the truck. The equipment yard with its rows of silent forklifts and container movers sitting dark and enormous under the sodium lights. Then they reached the south end. The road narrowed as they approached the concrete barrier. Beyond it, the ground dropped away in a short, rocky slope to the water. The ocean was flat and black and vast under the night sky. No moon, just a thick cover of cloud, and the distant red blink of a channel marker far out on the water. And rising from the rocky ground at the very edge of the property, the lighthouse. Jake looked at it through the windshield. It was taller than he had pictured from the property maps. 70, maybe 75 feet. The white paint had long since faded and cracked, and the exposed concrete beneath was stained gray and brown from years of ocean weather. The iron railings around the gallery platform near the top were corroded to a deep orange-brown. The lamp room at the very top was dark, the glass panels clouded with salt residue and age. The door at the base was old wood, heavy and swollen in its frame. No padlock, just a door that had warped shut over the years and stayed shut through its own dead weight. Darnell put the truck in park. He looked at the lighthouse for a moment, without speaking. Then he said, "That is not part of your route." Jake nodded. "Understood." "Structurally unsound?" "It is not part of your route," Darnell repeated. Not an answer. A boundary. Jake looked at him. Darnell's small, careful eyes were still on the lighthouse. "If you see anything from that building, any light, any movement, anything at all, you call me directly. My personal number. Not dispatch. Not the harbor authority line. Me." "What kind of anything?" Darnell finally looked at him. "You'll know." He put the truck in reverse. They drove back up the south road in silence, and Darnell never mentioned the lighthouse again. The first 2 nights were quiet. Jake drove the route methodically, logged his checks, drank coffee from his thermos, and found nothing unusual. The property was silent in the way that large industrial spaces are silent at night. Not peaceful, exactly, but empty. The containers groaned occasionally in the wind off the water. The sodium lights buzzed at a frequency just low enough to be almost inaudible. The ocean provided a constant low backdrop of movement that you stopped hearing after the first hour. He did not drive to the south end. He drove the route as specified, and he went home at 6 a.m., and he slept well, and he came back at 10 p.m. and did it again. On the third night, at 2:47 a.m., he saw the light. He was completing his log entry at the east gate. Truck, idling, the property spread out behind him in the amber glow of the sodium lights. He was writing the gate check timestamp. His pen was moving, and something in his peripheral vision pulled his attention south. He looked up. The lamp room of the lighthouse was lit. Not a faint glow. Not a reflection off the water or the clouds. A real, warm, amber light, burning clearly in the lamp room at the top of the tower, and as he watched, it began to turn. Slowly, the beam sweeping out through the salt-hazed glass, rotating in that long, steady arc that a working lighthouse makes. Deliberate, mechanical, alive. Jake set his pen down. He watched it turn for a full minute. The beam swept out across the black water, disappeared around the back of the tower, came back around, again. Steady and unhurried, and completely impossible. He picked up his radio and called Darnell. Darnell answered on the second ring. He had not been sleeping. His voice was alert and flat and completely unsurprised. "Is it turning?" he asked. "Yes," Jake said. A silence. Long enough to mean something. "Drive to the south gate. Park outside the barrier. Do not get out of the truck. I will be there in 20 minutes. Darnell. 20 minutes, Jake. Stay in the truck." Jake sat in the truck for 4 minutes. Then he drove south. He parked at the concrete barrier and looked at the lighthouse through the windshield. The light was still turning, warm amber sweeping out across the water and back. He could hear, or thought he could hear, the faint, mechanical hum of the lens mechanism from inside. A sound that should not have been audible from this distance. A sound that the building had not made in nearly 4 decades. He got out of the truck. He told himself he was just going to get closer. Just going to look at the door. Just confirm it was still shut and then wait for Darnell. The door was open. Not broke open. Not forced. Open. The heavy warped wood that had been swollen shut in its frame for years was simply open, standing slightly ajar as if someone had just passed through it and not pulled it closed behind them. Jake stood in front of the open door for a long moment. Then he pushed it wider with his shoulder and stepped inside. The circular base room of the lighthouse was exactly what he would have expected. Stone floor, curved stone walls, the metal spiral staircase rising through the center of the space, up through the tower to the lamp room above. A few corroded metal fixtures on the walls where equipment had once been mounted. Nothing else. The air was wrong. Cold, but not ocean cold. Not the damp, moving cold of the night outside. A different cold. Still, settled. The cold of a space that had been sealed for a long time, holding the same air for years. The kind of cold that sits in places where no living thing has been. Jake's torch swept the room. Empty. He looked up the spiral staircase. The amber light from the lamp room pulsed down through the center of the spiral from above. Slow rhythmic flashes as the lens turned. Warm light in cold air. He could hear the mechanism clearly now. A low, steady hum, and beneath it, just barely, the sound of the old gears moving. He put his foot on the first step. The iron was corroded and slightly soft under the surface rust. His boots made dull metallic sounds that echoed in the curved stone walls as he climbed. He counted the steps automatically, an old habit from the reserves. Always knowing your position. 10 steps, 15. The light from above grew stronger. The cold grew deeper. He climbed higher and the air became colder, which was wrong, because, heat rises, and the lamp room above him contained a burning light source, and none of this followed any rule he understood. 20 steps. 20. He stopped, breathing. It came from directly above him. Slow, deep, rhythmic. The breathing of something in a state of perfect rest, unhurried and enormous and patient in the way that only very old things are patient. It filled the staircase shaft completely. There was nowhere in the stone cylinder where the sound was not present. Jake stood on the 25th step and did not move. The breathing continued. In, out, as regular as the turning of the light above. His torch hand was shaking. He became aware of this without surprise. Simply noted it, the way you note a physical fact. He took one more step up. The breathing stopped. Instant and complete silence. Just the mechanism turning above, and the ocean far below, and his own heartbeat, which was considerably faster than he would have preferred. Then the voice, soft, dry, coming from the lamp room directly above him. Not loud, not projected, just spoken in a normal conversational tone, as if the speaker were sitting in the same room as him and simply talking. You should not have come up here, Jake. Jake did not move for a very long time. How do you know my name? The light turned above him. The amber pulse swept out across the water. Came back. No answer. Jake climbed the remaining steps. The lamp room was empty. The Fresnel lens, a beautiful and intricate thing, even after decades of disuse, rotated in its housing, driven by a mechanism that had no power source Jake could identify. The amber bulb behind it burned steadily. The beam swept out through the salt-hazed glass panels, 4 directions, slow rotation, the way it had swept for 64 years before someone decided it was no longer needed. No person, no figure, no presence of any kind that Jake could see or touch. He stood in the lamp room and turned in a slow circle. The glass panels surrounded him. The lens turned beside him. The mechanism hummed its low, steady hum. He looked out through the glass. The rocky ground far below was visible in the ambient glow of the lighthouse beam as it passed. Dark, wet rock. The edge of the water. The narrow strip of broken ground between the base of the tower and the ocean. And on the rocks, directly below the lamp room, a figure, tall, pale, standing completely still, with its feet in the shallow wash of the water, at the rock's edge, looking up. Jake pressed his hand against the cold glass and looked down. The figure did not move. It stood at the base of the lighthouse and looked up at the lamp room with the patient stillness of something that had been standing in that spot for a very long time. Its face was upturned. In the passing sweep of the lighthouse beam, Jake saw its expression clearly for one fraction of a second. It was smiling. Jake does not work at Sector 9 anymore. He drove to Darnell's house at 6 a.m. the next morning and sat in the driveway until the porch light came on and Darnell appeared in the doorway in a gray sweatshirt holding a mug of coffee. He looked at Jake's truck in his driveway and his expression did not change. He had been waiting for this. He listened to everything. He did not interrupt. He did not express disbelief. He stood on his porch in the early morning light and listened to all of it. The open door, the cold air, the breathing on the staircase, the voice, the empty lamp room, the figure on the rocks. And when Jake was done, Darnell was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "How many steps had you climbed when the breathing stopped?" Jake stared at him. "What? The staircase. How many steps up were you when the breathing stopped?" Jake thought back. He had counted automatically. The habit was too ingrained not to. 26, he said. I was on step 26. Darnell nodded. Slowly, like a man confirming something he already knew. "Edmund Hale," Darnell said, "the last lighthouse keeper. He died in 1986. They found him in the lamp room. No cause of death. Just gone." Jake waited. The inspector who found him wrote in his private notes, not the official report. His private notes that his daughter shared with me 15 years ago, that when he found Edmund was not in the chair. The lamp room was empty. He turned to go back down the stairs. He had made it down to step 26 when he heard something behind him and turned back. Darnell looked at Jake steadily. Edmund was in the chair when he turned back, hands folded, eyes open, already gone. The morning air sat between them. "Something stops at step 26, Darnell said. "Whatever is in that lamp room, it doesn't come below step 26. The inspector was safe on step 26. You were safe on step 26. "But I went up," Jake said. "I went all the way up, and the room was empty." "Was it?" Darnell said. It was not a question. Jake thought about the empty lamp room, the turning lens, the burning light with no power source. the voice that knew his name, and the figure on the rocks below, standing in the water, looking up at the lamp room with that patient, terrible smile. "What is it?" Jake asked. "What is actually in there?" Darnell drank from his mug, looked out at the street. "Edmund Hale kept that lighthouse for 11 years, he said. His predecessor kept it for 22 years before him. The keeper before that, 19 years. Every keeper of that lighthouse died in the lamp room, every single one, going back to 1923. They all died the same way, no cause. Just gone." He looked at Jake. "The harbor authority knows, they've always known. That's why they decommissioned it. That's why the door has never been properly sealed. Because whatever is in there, they decided they would rather leave it alone than provoke it by sealing it in." Jake sat in his truck. "The light turning," he said. "Why does the light turn?" Darnell was quiet for a moment. "I think it turns because it's calling," he said. "I think it has always been calling. Calling ships onto the rocks, calling people inside, calling them up the staircase." He looked at Jake with his small, careful eyes. "You went up, Jake. You went all the way up, and I came back down." "Yes," Darnell said, "you did." He did not say what he was thinking. He did not need to. The lighthouse on Sector 9 still stands. The harbor authority made 3 attempts to seal the door properly after Jake's incident. Heavy chain bolted into the stone, steel plate across the frame. Concrete poured into the gap between door and threshold. Each time, within 2 weeks, the door was open again. Not forced, not broken, simply open. They stopped trying after the 3rd attempt. The light still appears, irregular intervals, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes consecutive nights. The harbor patrol logs it when it happens, and the harbor authority closes the report the same day with the same notation. Probable, reflection, natural phenomenon, no action required. Jake moved 3 states away. He does not talk about Sector 9, and he does not talk about what he saw in the lamp room. But there is one thing he has never told anyone. Not Darnell. Not the harbor authority investigator who called him twice in the months after. Not the friend he eventually told the bare outline of the story 2 years later. When he stood in the lamp room, when he looked out through the glass panels at the figure standing on the rocks below, the figure was looking up at him. And when the lighthouse beam swept past and illuminated its face for that single fraction of a second, Jake recognized it. He did not know how. He had never seen a photograph. He had never been given a description. He had no reason to know that face, but he knew it the way you sometimes know things in dreams, completely and without explanation. It was Edmund Hale, standing in the water at the base of his lighthouse, smiling up at the lamp room where he had died, smiling at the place where something had kept him for nearly 40 years, smiling as if, after all this time, he was simply glad that someone had finally come to visit.